This is a continuation video of my previous video. In my previous video, I showed you how to build this garage that's behind me from the foundation up to the framing that you see here. So we got additional things to do, such as bracing, finish building the gable walls, etc. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. This channel is all about DIY to save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask for in return for making this video. So we got a lot to do today, so let's get started. If you have not seen the additional videos to this garage build series, I recommend you watching the previous videos for proceeding on to the rest of this video. Here is something you may not have known. If you want a ceiling height higher in the second story from the trusses, you can just have the truss manufacturer raise the truss up like you see here a little bit higher, and in this case it was about 20 inches or so, and that gave me extra room height upstairs. So because of that, I had to go through and sheet in the rest of this after we set the trusses like you see me doing here. Real simple, just rip down a bunch of sheets then shot them right to the trusses. I'm now going to finish framing in the gable ends, and while I had the scaffolding available, I went ahead and had my helper hand me up the material to get it into the upstairs. Now that I got all the material up here to frame in these gable ends for this room, what we need to do is get the measurement across the floor, up the sides, and all this, because we need to make a frame first before we stud it in since we got these angles. When it comes to figuring up the bevel for this, if you take your speed square and we place it right here on the slope, as you can see, we got our 712, just as we know the roof pitch is from the previous video. So that gives us, if you look at the degree, about a 30-degree angle. So that 30 degree is what we're going to cut our bevel on. So let's take a look at this next slope right up here. 7 foot is the ceiling height in this room. And now if you take a look at the 712 going this way, if we put our speed square right on the pivot point to where this would intersect, if you take it down flush to running with the truss, it gives us a 60-degree angle, which would be the complementary angle to the 30-degree. And we're going to cut this bottom plate 11 foot 11 3/4 inch to go clear across the bottom of this opening. I'm now going to cut the sides of the walls, which is 58 5/8, and I got to subtract 1.5 inches to allow for the bottom plate. So I'm going to measure up 58 5/8 and just subtract 1.5 inches. All right, so right there needs to be the short point of the wall when I cut it. So now what we need to do, if you remember right, we need a 30-degree to go up on that slope. So in order to do so, I'm going to bevel my saw right here to 30 degrees. So 30 degrees locks right there. So now we got a slope that we can cut on our stud. Now I'm going to make a straight line from where the longest point hits. And now whenever we cut it with our saw like so, it's going to give us the bevel in which we need it to be. So as you can see, it gave us a 30-degree bevel that's going to act as one side of the wall, and now we're going to have to cut the other one for the other side of the wall. All right, I now got my two sides. Now I'm going to cut across the top. And because I got a lot of cutting to do, I went ahead and set up my miter saw, but the same idea, 30-degree bevels and everything like that, still the same. So we're going to measure over for our top plate. Now our top plate, we're just going to make a straight cut because we're just going to butt with a 30-degree angle right into it. So we're going to pull 5 foot. So now for our side pieces that go from the wall up to the ceiling, we're going to have a 30-degree and a 30-degree, and I just got to subtract 1.5 inches for my side plate. So we're going to do that now. So now when we cut this to length, we got to subtract 1.5 inches off for the side plate. And it's going to be a 30-degree bevel as well. So now we got to cut one for the other side. Now before I go any further, I went ahead and dry fit everything together. And I'm going to go ahead and shoot it together and stand it up just to make sure it's going to set right and then we'll go ahead and lay it out, and always put 3 nails in each connection. Using a nail gun to nail together this wall is very handy because whenever you nail together angles, it tends to want to be driven left or right. So whenever you use a nail gun, it'll shoot it right to wherever it is sitting. Dry fit it in the opening, and the opening looks good. So now we're going to lay it down, put our layout on it, and shoot all of our studs in. Take a look at the plans for the window that's going in this opening. We need to make the rough opening 45 and 72. So that's what we got to do when we frame for the opening. I'm going to begin by putting my 16 on center layout across the bottom plate. I'm now just going to take my speed square and then square up each one of those marks. As you can see, I'm laying the 16 on center layout just like I would any other wall. But I would like to add, I could have done a 2 foot on center layout here with no problem, because the gable truss is laid out 2 foot on center anyways, as you remember from my previous video, but I just wanted to let you know that. I'm now going to build the header for the window, and this window, as you see in the rough opening, was 45 inches, so I got to make my header 48 inches, 1.5 inches on each side for trimmers to support the header. And this ain't weight bearing. I'm really just putting this header in to have a place to shoot trim around and to pad it down some. So we're just going to build it out 2x4s, 2 plies of 2x4s, and 1 ply of OSB to space it properly so it's the right thickness. And this is a good time to use any junky studs that you got. When I say junky studs, I really mean ones that have bad edges. Now I need to cut the trimmers for the header. So the easy way to do that is take our height between the bottom plate and the top plate, which is 80 inches, and then subtract 3.5 inches for the header. So that's all you got to do to figure up the trimmer. So that gives us 76.5 inches. Now I got to cut 2 of those. Now I got to cut down 2 studs 80 inches to fit the height of the opening. I'm going to place the window directly in the middle of this opening. So all I got to do is find the center of the top and bottom and then shoot the opening together accordingly. So in order to get the bottom, we're just going to do 3 2x4 stacked on top of each other instead of cutting a bunch of little blocks. The noise that you hear that sounds like static is actually rain hitting the roof. Now for these studs, here's our layout. So what we're going to do is place them here and then measure off the opening to get the marks up here. It's a lot easier to do that than trying to calculate where it's going to intercept up there. So our measurement down here is 13 7/8. So now all I gotta do is come up here, 13 7/8. That looks good there. Now it's got a mark underneath where to cut it. We're now going to stand this wall up into place. Typically we would chalk a line from one point to the other and make sure we're perfectly straight, but it rained and blew water onto where we need to chalk our line. So what we're going to do is stand it up and then get it flush with the outside of the board, which is technically really the same thing. So we're going to improvise. So we're going to stand this wall up and get it installed. For anybody concerned about the water that's on the subfloor, Advantech is rated to handle a little bit of water. And now to secure the wall, we just nail from into the wall up into the truss, and that's going to hold it stable. After that gable is complete, I'm now moving over to the gable that's on the other side. And as you can see, it's the exact same pattern and layout, which made it really easy. Now that we got the framing of the gables done, we got to go up here and sheet from the outside, and then we got to put the house wrap over it. In order to support this pavilion side or the outdoor kitchen side, we need to install what's called knee bracing from this corner up to the truss. and that's going to keep the strength from it shifting left to right. Now going this way, it's fine because it's tied in with the garage, so it won't shift this way. It's the left to right movement right here, or the shear strength, is what needs to be improved on this side. So I'm going to take 6x6 post and 45 it from here. I'm going to come 6 foot up to that truss. Because I got to cut angles on the 6x6 post, I'm going to switch over to my 12-inch miter saw because I want to be able to make a clean cut, and that's going to be the best way to do it. My 10-inch miter saw isn't quite big enough, so this is what I'm going to be switching to for this. And now I'm going to set my 6x6 post up here on this miter saw. I'm going to start by 45ing this side of the 6x6 post, and I had to set workbenches up to support the other side of it. So I'm just going to turn my saw to a 45-degree angle, and now we're just going to cut and make sure our 6x6 post is nice and square against the miter saw at a nice 45 here. Now we're going to rotate the post in order to finish cutting through this. All right, as you can see, we got a nice 45 here. We're going to get a measurement to where it intersects into the truss. In order to calculate the angle we need here, I'm going to measure down to my mark right from here, and we got 40 inches from the top over. So now I'm going to come up here and measure over 40 inches, and it's going to be about right here. And now, since I want this to go up into and cover this truss, I'm just going to measure from point to point and make sure I intersect that mark. 66, 67 inches. So 67 inches to the short point where it intersects the truss. And this exact measurement to where it hits the truss is 56.5 inches. I now got to pull my measurement for the 56.5 off the point of this 45. 56.5 is right here. And now I got to put a 45 degree on it right here. So all we got to do is line it up with that and pivot over to 45 degree on the speed square. And we're going to put a mark right there and then continue it this way. All right, and our total length was 67 inches. So we're just going to pull it here, 67 right there. And do the same thing. That's going to be a 45 as well. And now this one, we're going to cut totally off right there. So we got to chisel out 1.5 inches, 2 inches by the time you add the sheathing out of this section right here. I'm now just going to grab my chainsaw to cut this off. And if you want to purchase this chainsaw, I'll put a link in the description below. Awesome saw, by the way. And now I'm just going to put a square line right up here. Now I'm just going to follow that and cut this off first. All right, now we're going to take this off the bench. I'm now adjusting my saw to 1.5 inches deep to make the cuts. And now with all those cuts, it's going to allow me to knock it out in order to give us the right depth. All right, now smoothed it up using the saw. Before I lift this brace up into place, I'm first gonna start one of these timber screws into the middle of this. So that way when we lift up in place, I can just drive the screw to hold it. And if you've never seen these before, these are the 10-inch long ones, and they drive right into the wood. And they're very, very strong, and it avoids you from having to use lag bolts in this case. And as you can see, it's going to have to be driven in with an impact driver because it's going to take a lot of torque. So I'm going to start this in there first. In order to figure out where to start it, right here's the slope intersecting the post. I'm going to go about the middle of that. And then I'm going to mark right out here. And then I'm going to take my speed square down, and that's going to find the center right there. And I'm going to go ahead and start that screw first before I lift it up into place. Before I lift it up into place, I installed clamps holding a piece of sheathing to act as a ledge to hold it. Since I got one timber screw holding here, the nails holding up above, I'm going to place my 2 anchors up into this upper part. I'm now going to install these 6 1/4 inch bolts in the upper part of that knee brace. This is made by Through Lock. It's supposed to replace carriage bolts, and they're very slick, and wait till you see how these babies work. I'm going to place a bolt here, and I'm first going to drill out to get through the sheathing. I'm now going to put on a 5/16 impact socket. I'm going to take the end of this bolt off, then we're going to drive it right in through that knee brace. I'm going to feel through until it peeks through. All right, now before I tighten those up, I need to go on the other side of that bolt and place these in order to sink the tip in so it acts as a carriage bolt. There we go. And that's all there is to this upper part. Now for these last 2, if you place this bolt or this timber screw square going up, as you can see, if we want to go through the center, we want to stay about right here. So if we want to split the difference, we want to screw this one in about like that. So we're going to do one on each side. All right, now I'm going to remove this. And that knee brace is installed. Now I got to do the same on the other side. I'm now going to cut the knee bracing from this post up to the beam, and we measured over 25 5/8 to get the same angle of our side that we started earlier. So if you do that, it takes 36 1/2 inches to get the diagonal going across here. So we're just going to cut our 6x6 posts with 45-degree angles to make those pieces. I'm also going to go ahead and pre-start my timber screws so I don't have to mess with those when I'm holding the piece up there. Now, as you can see, I like to mark with my speed square on the timber, so that way I have the exact same look across all of the bracing. All right, now just got to do the same to the other side. I'm now going to cut blocks every 4 foot on center across this truss bay. And the reason why I got to do that is because I'm going to build a faux header here. And it's going to get wrapped in PVC board to mimic the other header. So it's going to look like a header's wrapped around the whole thing here. So it's going to give it a nice appearance. So all I got to do is measure right between these 2 trusses and then shoot blocks in every 4 foot on center as nailers. Now, to determine the height of the blocks in which you need to cut to make the header, if we measure down, we got 14 inches. So we subtract 3 inches because 1.5 inches at the top and the bottom plate of the faux header. I'm now going to put together the faux header. I got my 11-inch blocks there and my layout laid across here. I'm just going to lay it out, nail the bottom part on, and then nail the top part next. now going to put my faux beam up into place, and I got strapping I'm going to use to hold it temporarily until I nail it. Now that I got it lined up where I want it on the outside, I'm now going to nail it into the truss and into the blocking that we put in. I now need to just stick frame the rest of this. So in order to do so, I'm going to go off the bottom of my fake beam to the bottom of the real beam, because that's what we're trying to line up anyways. And then I just got to mark wherever it hits right here on these posts. And that's where I got to cut into to fill in. So I simply just got to cut a block to finish this bottom run, and then a block from here to here, and then just put in little studs right there. Whenever you have a short wall to finish up house wrap, an easy trick to do is what I'm doing here is just cutting the house wrap to length to what you need to finish up. And then as you can see, it has the perfect width in order to finish up the wall and go over the header of the pavilion. I'm now going to show you how to build what's called a bird box. Some people call them pork chops, some people call them soffit returns. Whatever you call them, they're all the same thing. It's just a place for your soffit to change directions and go up another way. So the first thing I got to do is cut this little tail off from this gable side. And very simple to do that. I'm just going to take a speed square, place right here, mark a square line for what I need to cut, and then take my circular saw and just cut that right off. All right, now that that's out of the way, I need to install a board here coming out to intercept this overhang. In order to mark where the soffit's going to hit the side of the building, I'm just going to take a framing square, place it flat against the building, and then mark right where the top of the framing square hits the building. And then come over here and do the same thing. And now I'm going to take my framing square and mark a line from mark to mark. And that line is going to be to the bottom of my board. I'm now going to take a 2x10 and place it right up to where it's going to hit that gable. And now as you can see, it's going to hit this truss right here in this case. So I got to cut right around that truss. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You could also cut this down a little bit, but I like to keep as much meat on the 2x10 as I can. Now that I got the board notch, I'm going to place it up into place, slide it right up to that mark, like so. And we're going to hold it right directly on that line. Then I'm going to take my nail gun, nail it right to the building. And as you can see, I cut a little bit more than I needed out right there, but that's fine. I now just got a nail from the overhang into that block. And that's going to be a nice solid return here. Now I just got to cut what a lot of people again call a pork chop to fill in this little spot here. And it's easy to get those measurements. All I got to do is measure down here, and that gives me about 6 inches. And then over to this point where we just cut, and that's going to be about 10 1/4, maybe a little light. And then all we got to do is make a mark from point to point, then make a straight line. And now it's going to measure up the 6 inches here, and then our 10 1/4 this way, a little light. And now I'm going to take my framing square and make a line from mark to mark. Now I simply just got to cut this mark. Got my pork chop. Now we're going to dry fit the pork chop into place and see what we got. And that looks really good. So now all we gotta do is shoot that on right there. And now as you can see, the soffit's gonna come here and terminate, and then we're gonna run our soffit down to here and cover this in fascia, but that's for another video. But I gotta frame this out at every corner. I'm now going to install these 11 1/4 outdoor accent brackets made by Simpson Strong Tie, and these are going to give me a solid connection from the beam to the post, and I'm also going to put it on the diagonal bracing in order to give it a nice cosmetic look. And along with these, I got the 3.5 inch structural screws, and these are going to be installed using the star drive that comes with it. And also to give this a nice appearance as if we used big bolts, I'm going to install these washers, and these are the outdoor accents that's by the Simpson Strong Tie as well. All of this goes together, and I'll put a link in the description below if you want to check these out for yourself. But I'm going to install all this stuff onto the post and the beam, so let's get started. As you can see, the screws come with the star drive, so you don't have to buy that separately. And these are black to match the outdoor accent line as well. If you're wondering why the house wrap was put on before these brackets, it's because I had to wait for them to come in the mail in order to install them. So I was waiting for about a week, so I went ahead and wrapped this in house wrap to keep the weather off the beam. So now I'm just going to pull this house wrap back where I'm installing these products. Now I'm just going to center that right up with the post like so, and line up with my marks, and then anchor it to the post and the beam. And I'm going to use that star drive to drive this screw. All right, as you can see up here, I did not use the washer, and that is simply because I gotta put this in behind the trim board, the PVC board, so I'm going to have to route this out. So I didn't want it protruding more than it had to be, but I'm going to use the washers down here to give it the nice appearance. And now for these two holes, I'm going to take the washer and place the screw through it first, like so, and then drive it into those holes. And that's all there is to it. Now I'm going to do the same on the diagonal side. When I do these diagonals, I don't want the bottom of this to be past this look. So what I'm going to do is measure down to where that's hitting. And if I measure down, I got about 4 3/4 to that area there, and that's at the very bottom. So what I'm going to do is measure over 4 3/4 to make sure I don't go past that on each side of the diagonal. All right, as you can see, that's all there is to it. Now I'm just going to repeat this on all the posts that have the bracing to the beam. I wanted to give you a close-up of what these look like after they're installed. As you can see up above, they're driven right into the beam. And then below, it's the same thing other than I used the washers for the cosmetics in this case. And everything turned out really nice, and I love the look of this once it was all said and done. Just so you know, Simpson Strong Tie also makes brackets that are in a T-shape to connect the beam to the post as well, along with many other designs whenever you're making connections. I'm now going to work on framing the interior walls, and if you remember from the plans, I got a bathroom going over here, and then I got my stairwell going up through here. So I'm going to measure up to this truss, and I got to take off 3 inches in order to cut for my studs. I bought 10 footers in order to create the studs here, so we're going to have to cut them all down to make these walls. So I'm going to measure up off the floor and try to hold my tape measure nice and plumb, and I got 115 inches, so we got to cut all of our studs down to 112 inches. I'm now going to lay out on the concrete slab where my walls are going to go before I frame them up. And if you remember right from my plumbing video, when I plumbed this stuff underneath of the concrete slab before it was poured, if you haven't seen that, check out the video in the top right hand corner of the screen. But I need to make sure I encapsulate these pipes within the wall. So I made sure I did that when I was roughing in the plumbing. So I'm going to start by laying out my walls onto the concrete slab. If I measure 113 off the block, that puts this wall right here to where it puts everything inside of it. Now I'm going to measure 113 against this wall. And now I'm going to take my chalk line and chalk a line from the 113 mark here to the 113 mark here to get where I need to lay out the wall. I'm now going to plumb down exactly where this stair opening is going to be, because I want to make sure my wall is hitting flush with the edge of this truss. So I'm going to just hold up one of the studs. All right, that works. All right, so we marked on the floor, plumb down right from here to where our wall is going to set. I'm now going to measure off my wall to that mark, and I got 47 and about 3/4. So now I'm going to come down here and measure 47 3/4 and chalk that line for this wall. And now for code, I need to have enough room on each side of my toilet. So in order to get that distance, I have to go about 15.5 inches off the center of this toilet. So I'm just going to go about 16 inches because I don't have to be that tight. So I'm just going to measure over 16 inches and make my mark here on the floor. And now I'm going to take my square and just square off the line we just made in order to get this mark. And always put an X on what side the wall sets. So as you can see, the chalk line is where the wall is going to be setting, and this is the outside wall. And right here, where the X is, where the wall is actually going to set. And as you can see, the pipe's going to be inside the wall here. Goes around and then comes down through here. Now this pipe's going to be inside the cabinet here for the indoor sink. And then the wall's going to end right here at this mark. I'm now going to cut the bottom plate and top plate around this layout. And just so you're aware, we got to use a pressure treated 2x6 for our bottom plate, and then we're just going to use standard lumber for our top plate. All of these walls are going to be 16 inches on center. Now with that being said, from here back, the rest of these walls are just simple 16 on center layouts. Now this wall has the most complicated of all the layouts, which still ain't complicated, but I just wanted to put that out there. I need to make sure I get my bathroom door opening tight against this wall. So in order to do so, I'm going to have a 24-inch door. So whenever you have a 24-inch door, your rough opening, you just add an inch on each side. So rough opening is going to be 26 inches. So if we start back here, I'm going to have 3 inches. There's going to be a trimmer here. And then there's going to be a king stud here, so trimmer, king stud. And then if we come off that, 26 inches for our rough opening, that puts us at right here. And then we add 1.5 inches for a trimmer, and then we add another 1.5 inches to the end of our king stud. So we know we're going to have a jack, king stud, and then a jack, king stud. And then with that being said, it's really important that we don't have any studs right here in this bay, because that's where we're going to put our sub panel. So with that being said, I'm actually going to use this as my 16 on center layout edge. So that way I know all that will be in its own bay. So if you take a look, that puts me right here. Then if I put a stud there, that gives me the edge right here, which in this case, it works out good because the stud's going to hit right where that king stud is. So that's awesome. So now to finish the rest of this layout, we're going to do 16 on center off of that mark. And then we're just going to transfer the layout onto this bottom plate and top plate all at once. And right here at this end, we're going to put a drywall nailer for this wall. So in order to figure that up, I'm going to measure over 5.5 inches. We know we need to set a stud right here for that. In order to intersect into this exterior wall, typically when these are on the interior, it's just like a U shape. But because we're on the exterior, in order to insulate it as well, we're going to build it and then pad it in another 2 studs. So that way it gives you a place for the insulation, because you can't get back and insulate this later. Got to have the 104 5/8 studs that go into the walls that we built in the previous video. So all we got to do is make like a U shape. So I'm just going to take my framing nailer and do that first. So we're just going to line that flush, put it up here like so. Now we're going to place another pre-cut on top of it and make that U shape that I was explaining earlier. And now in order for the insulation to be placed for the exterior wall, I'm just going to fill it up with these studs. Now we're going to go install this in the wall. All right, we're just going to place this right in the wall where the wall is going to intersect. Right here is our mark. We want to make sure this mark is going to be the edge of the wall, so it has to be right here. So we're going to place that right where it belongs. All right, now that we're on our mark, we're just going to nail it into place. I'm now just going to plumb it up, and it looks like it needs to go this way at the top. All right, now we got her installed. I'm now going to build the door jacks. Now's a good time to use any bad lumber that you have. When I say bad lumber, I mean stuff like this that's really nasty. We can wedge them in face to face with the bad sides in order to cover it up. And you'll understand more here in just a moment. So the door rough opening has to be 82 inches. So in order to get that, all we got to do is subtract 1.5 inches off 82 because of the sole plate or the bottom plate. So that gives me an 80.5 inch piece I got to cut. I got to cut 2 on for each side of the door. And I now need to cut my door header, and like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be 26-inch rough opening, so I got to cut it 29 inches to give me 1.5 inches for each trimmer. I'm now going to take one of the boards that we cut earlier for the total stud height. It's going to act as the king stud, and then right here is one of the trimmers that we just cut 80.5 inches. We're just going to nail these together to make our jack. I'm now going to put the wall together right here, and I'm going to put my bottom plate down here. Now here's the thing. This bottom plate is pressure treated, so we need to use galvanized nails. So I'm going to shoot together real quick with standard nails, just 2 nails a piece. Then I'm going to hand nail my galvanized nails to finish it up. And because this isn't a weight-bearing wall, we're just going to put this board in here like so as the header, because you don't need anything more than that, just enough to nail your trim to. And in order to finish the rest of the height of this, we just measured down to that header to the top, and we got 29 5/8. Before I stand the wall, I just got to notch out for the electrical and plumbing pipes that's coming up through the floor. We're now going to stand the wall into place. I'm now going to nail it to our corner. All right, nice and plumb there. Now we'll tack it into place. In order to anchor this to the concrete, I'm going to use what's called a ram set. And they just take these little 22 cartridges, more or less, that's made for the device. And then we put a nail in order to shoot it down through the sole plate here. And I'll always use eye protection, ear protection for this for sure. In order to load this, all we got to do is pull it open, put our charge right here in the top. And then after we do that, I'm going to go ahead and put my nail here, hold it against the plate, push down and hit with the hammer right on top here. And then if it doesn't drive it in all the way, just finish it off with your hammer. And I'm going to put one every 2 foot or so. I'm now going to plumb the wall, and after I get it plumb, I'm going to shoot it right up to this joist. Now that we got the walls standing, we got to install drywall nailers. All we got to do here is take 2x6s and let them overhang about 1 inch, 1.5 inches in order to give me a place to screw my drywall to. So we're just going to go around that edge of the wall and do that. I now got to install blocking on any wall that I want to put cabinets on. This is going to be a long run of cabinets. So I'm going to start here. And now as far as the heights go, I'm going to come 54 inches off the floor to the bottom of my first row of blocking. So that's going to be right here. And then I'm going to go 30 inches above that to the top of the top row blocking. So 30 inches here and right here. So now I'm going to chalk a line for this row blocking and that row blocking. Now that I got my lines chalked, I'm just going to nail the blocking in where they belong. Again, this bottom one's going to be to the bottom of the first row, then this top marks to the top of the top row. Next, I'm going to go ahead and do the bracing for my truss. I got 2x4s up here running for my top cord bracing. Then I got some 2x6s that are 16 footers for my diagonal bracing. Now definitely check with your truss manufacturer to see what bracing they recommend. That's more important than what you're seeing me do because every truss manufacturer is going to be different in what they recommend. So I'm just going to do a time lapse shooting all this up. If you remember from my previous video, I went through and installed all of these hurricane ties where the trusses were going to set before we set the trusses. Now I'm going to go back through with my metal strap nailer and nail off each one of those hurricane ties. And to do this, very easy. Wherever they hit here, you put a nail right in each one of the holes indicated on the hurricane tie. Now that the hurricane ties are all nailed off, I got to go through and nail off all of these joist hangers that I installed when I framed in this roof. And I'm just going to use galvanized nails to do this. If you want to see how I'm going to install the shingles that you see up here on the garage roof, or if you want to see the beginning of this project, check out this video and check out this playlist. It'll help you out.